Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we're going to be talking about motivation. Motivation, we could all use that sometimes more than others. So let's talk about motivation. So Donovan, what are your initial thoughts on what it takes to get motivated?
Yeah, so before I even get to that part, I want to sort of touch on something that I think is really interesting about motivation, which is
Sure.
I feel like a lot of people think that they need motivation to get things done, and by need motivation, I mean they need to feel like, oh, I really want to go do this thing. This seems like exactly what I want to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, what we have to do is produce enough motivation, right? Not like, oh, I'm super motivated. Here I go. I'm ready to go crush the day, knock all this stuff out, but produce enough motivation to actually get the tasks that we want to or need to done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing that I kind of want to get out of the way. As far as actually increasing motivation. So I guess another piece of that is I kind of look at motivation as a scale or a range, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm either motivated or not motivated. I have a certain level of motivation to do a particular task. So it's all about, what are the different sort of tactics or pieces that we can use to sort of start sliding that scale. And if you're always looking for, oh, I'm going to be a 10 before I start doing this, a lot of stuff is not going to get done. And the people who get a lot of stuff done
Mm-hmm.
typically aren't at a 10 all day for every task.
Yeah.
But they typically have ways of sort of pushing, like, okay, I'm at a 2 right now. I need to get myself to at least a 5 to actually get through the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we'll get into some of those tactics and whatnot. But before that, I'd love to get your take on the topic.
Yeah, no, I thought you brought up a really good point in that we can't all be 100% motivated all the time every day. It's not realistic, and we're not going to get a whole lot done if we're just waiting for like the motivation to be cranked up all the way. And yeah, sometimes you can still get things done even if your motivation is really low. I think that's a really good point that you made, because sometimes it just takes just a little baby step for you to like increase that motivation just a little bit to get you in the flow of things. And that actually, once you're in the action, maybe it's like working out or something, it actually is easier. It's like that starting point that's like the hardest for a lot of people. But I get that motivation. It ebbs and flows, it comes and goes, and to understand that's part of the process, but it doesn't necessarily have to stop you from doing the things that you want to accomplish out of life. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, because, going back to one of your examples, working out,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
There are so many days that I don't
Mhm.
feel like working out.
Right.
And there were times in my life that, and there are other things I do this with, but
Yeah.
that I would go, oh, I don't feel like doing it, so I'm
Mhm.
not going to do it.
Yeah.
And that would just completely derail my behavior. And I
Mhm.
see this around me all the time, right?
I
All
see
kinds of
it
different
too.
people, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I do it, I'm sure. I just don't
Mhm.
catch it for certain behaviors.
Right.
But it's just like, I don't feel like doing it, so I'm not going to.
Mhm.
And it's just not going to lead to the type of results you want. And
Right.
and also, building on what you said, a lot of times you'll see that your initial motivation is not the same as your motivation once you actually get started, which
Mhm.
we can go back to working out.
Mhm.
The idea of doing a workout doesn't sound very appealing most of the time.
Right.
But for me, and I've seen this with other people too, you get in, maybe the third minute still sucks, fifth minute still sucks, but
Mhm.
by 10, 15 minutes in, you kind of get into a certain flow and are
Mhm.
able to just knock out the rest of it and feel better afterwards. So
Yeah.
again, just really want to highlight this point of motivation to the level of like, I am so ready to do this. I'm going to go do it right now and knock it out
Yeah.
isn't necessary. And if
Mhm.
you expect to have that all the
Mhm.
time, you're not going to get hardly any of the things you want done.
Right. Right. Yeah, and to circle back, I really like that you created the scale of motivation, because I think that's really important to kind of notice where you are on the scale, not let it determine whether or not you take the action, but just kind of going back to our workout example, sometimes doing the thing repeatedly, even though you continue to resist it, like you do it more and more, like working out. I used to be just lucky to work out once or twice a week, but once I kind of like got up to 4 days a week consistently, I was more motivated. So it didn't happen overnight. I was definitely that person that would make constant excuses of like, I don't feel like it. I'm tired today. I had a long day at work. I'm not really in the mood. I'm feeling cranky and grumpy or whatever it is, which is like, yeah, maybe my motivation was like at a 1 or 2, and that wasn't enough to like bump it up. But if I were like, okay, well, let's work out for like 10 minutes, that's, even if I'm not that motivated, it seems like a doable thing to do. So maybe that's what I have to do. But going back to the point you made about, I think there are times where, maybe there's valid times where like maybe I just had a death in the family. Maybe I don't work out today because I need to grieve. There are times like that, but just like notice, is this like a frequent occurrence, or is this just like, you know, oh, I'm grumpy and tired all the time, so therefore I don't work ever because I have no motivation. Then that's like a consistent pattern versus like these occasional like situations that, yeah, warrant, time to take off or grieve or recover or whatever that might be. Maybe it's like being sick. Obviously, if you're sick, you can't work out. But hopefully you're not sick all the time. So that's a valid reason to not work out. But I think it's letting go of those excuses and really noticing the patterns. And if you're consistent like 2 with motivation, that's okay. Maybe the goal is like, okay, if I'm just working out 1 day a week, I'm never motivated to work out, I'm going to just still do it even though I'm not motivated. I'm not going to use the excuses anymore. I'm going to just like work towards 3 days a week and maybe 4 days a week. And then you start to notice like, oh, I don't resist so hard going to the gym anymore. I actually look forward to it. And that's where I'm at. I never feel like I'm a 10 ever. Like even now, even though I consistently work out, but I feel like, maybe before I was at like a 2 motivation. So I was very easily swayed out of working out. But now that I've been working out 4 times a week, I'm probably like at least a 6 out of 10 most of the time. It depends on the workout, but I'd say, yeah, my motivation's much better, but I still like, I don't always feel like it. Sometimes I don't even, like yesterday's workout, I was like dying. It's not enjoying it. All this like burpees and wall balls. I was not liking it, not loving it, but I felt good after, and I was still motivated to go to the gym today. So I decide that like my motivation level doesn't determine me doing it, and sometimes doing the thing increases your motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're right on the edge of talking about some of the activities or things that you can actually do to kind of shift your motivation up the scale a little bit. I don't know if you mentioned this explicitly, but the way that I think about it in my mind is oftentimes I don't feel motivated to do things because I project how much effort it's going to be.
Yeah.
And it seems terrible. So and you sort of mentioned this, but not explicitly, is one of the things that's been really useful for me is taking sort of these bigger things that I want to get accomplished, right? So let's say I'm not working out. I would like to work out 6 days a week.
Right.
On the face of it, that sounds like a lot, right? There's a huge gap between I'm not doing anything right now to like, here's the
right,
whole
that's a
thing.
big jump. Yeah.
So one of the things, and I think there's actually a bunch of research around this. One of the things that's useful is basically breaking down parts of the task. You definitely mentioned this, like making it so small that it's completely approachable, right? So, maybe you want to work out 6 days a week. Well, in your mind, like at the core, it's gonna be like, oh, well, this is like an hour workout. I go to my place, I go do all this stuff. Like, okay, it's a lot. But if you change it to something like, okay, I'm gonna work out 6 days a week, and all I have to do is put on my gym clothes and, I don't know, walk around the block, something that's much more approachable. You will find that, as you mentioned, over time, motivation seems a little bit higher because the perceived effort goes down, right? As you
Right.
kind of do your walk every day or whatever you're working on, you will be more familiar with the experience and less
Mhm.
likely to go, oh God, 6 days of working out, this is going to be the worst thing ever.
Mhm.
So that's one of the tactics that I found a lot of value in, is basically just finding smaller pieces of the sorts of habits that I want to build. And this can
Mhm.
be with anything. I did this with writing for a long time. For a long
Yeah.
time, I thought like,
Yeah.
I'm going to write the whole book. I'm going to write 50 pages every day.
Mhm.
Okay. Then I eventually pared that down to like, I will write a paragraph every day. Like, I don't have any
Mhm.
excuse to not do that. That seems very manageable. And then a
Mhm.
lot of times I ended up with three,
More.
4, 5, 6 pages.
Yeah.
But that was one of the initial ways that I cut through sort of that, like, this is a 2 in motivation to write
Mhm.
all these pages. This seems like so much. Oh, okay. If it's just a paragraph, if it's just a walk around the block, I guess I'm
Mhm.
more like a 6. Like, I can definitely do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what I, would do consistently. I would do the 7-minute workout app when I was like really bad and inconsistent. I was just like, okay, we all have 7 minutes. We can find time for 7 minutes. So even though I didn't like the workout necessarily, I know I could have gotten a better workout if I went somewhere, but it got me moving, and that actually led to my path of now doing an hour doesn't seem that hard anymore. But it was like incremental, and it wasn't like a 360 change for me. It was a gradual process. And I think you made a really great point about, the things that seem overwhelming, to break it down into like smaller, manageable, achievable pieces, and to give yourself some slack. It's like if your ambition is like super high, it's like let's say you want to make like 20K a month or something like that. What's great, but you're making like 1K a month right now. It's like that's ambitious, but do you really know what it's gonna take to like get there, and like what actions it would take to get there? It's like, okay, I love to shoot for the stars, but like let's maybe try with like let's go to 5K first. Like let's get like what would it take to get to 5K first, and like once you're there, it's like okay, let's go to the next step. Like let's get to 10K, then to 20K, and instead of like, I think what happens is like, oh, I have this goal of doing 20K a month and I only got to, 3K or something like that, then you're just beating yourself up about like, oh, I failed my goal. So like, I don't know if I'm doing it, but you made progress. And that's something to like validate your victory about. There's this process that takes time, and I think it takes like also being able to create realistic goals that are slightly outside your zone, but that's still like achievable, so then you feel more like a winner versus a failure all the time. You get what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that segues perfectly into another strategy or tactic that I've had a lot of success with,
Hmm.
which is basically, those bigger goals that like jump from 1K to 20K. That's the stuff that's like kind of exciting, right? That's the stuff
Yeah.
that's like, oh, this is cool. This is what I want to work toward. This is a totally different
Hmm.
life.
Hmm.
So kind of using a little bit of both, like you were saying, on those days of like, okay, I made 1K this last month. This next month, I'm gonna try to crank up to 1.1K, right? Like that might not be as exciting.
Hmm.
So you can kind of tune back into sort of your why, right? The
Yeah.
why behind these behaviors that you might not be as motivated to do.
Hmm.
And sometimes that'll help bump you up a couple points in motivation, right? Where you think like, oh, like I don't really want to work on my business today or whatever. I guess that'd
Hmm.
be kind of excessive. You should probably work on your business most days. Anyway, um,
If you want to
but
get to
like,
20K,
oh,
you probably do. you know.
like I don't want to, call this client. I don't want to do whatever this specific
Yeah,
behavior is
right.
that drives money.
Hmm.
Having these higher level goals and remembering like, okay, the reason why I need to get this done is because I have this other goal. Like there's this other thing that I want. I
Hmm.
want to be able to run a marathon. I want to be able to whatever.
Hmm.
That can help, or it's just like one additional tool that you can use to sometimes notch up the motivation a couple points. And I found
Hmm.
really good success with that. Same thing, like going back to the book, right? There'd be times where it's like, I don't even want to write this paragraph today. Like, I don't want to work on this. and then
Mhm.
realizing like, actually, I have this idea for this book. I really want to get this done, and I really want to get it out into the world so that I can see what happens. A lot of days that would help get me at least to, a 5 or a 6 or whatever I need to
Mhm.
actually take
Mhm.
some action.
Right. Yeah. Really. Yeah. Good points you made. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and because I do work with people, because I, as a naturopathic doctor, I'm giving a lot of like tools and recommendations on what you can do to improve your health and your lifestyle to feel better in your body and your mind. But a lot of times, it's overwhelming. There's a lot to do. It doesn't happen overnight, especially with those dietary changes that I recommend. And so it can seem like a lot for people. And I get that motivation is going to be a big piece of you actually following through with a plan. I don't expect you to follow the plan 100% perfectly, because it's like a learning curve, and it's building these habits, and that's a process. So one of the things that I do as like an exercise in my hypnotherapy sessions when I'm working with them, because I like hypnotherapy because it gives people motivation and confidence to do the things that they know that they should be doing or want to do. And one of the exercises in it's like where they kind of like separate out those two parts of them into like the part of you that wants the thing that you want, like wants that successful business, but then the other part of you is like the part of you that kind of like sabotages that effort. That's like, I don't want to, or I don't feel like calling my client or prospects or whatever that might be. And just kind of like facilitating, I'm not like giving any suggestions during this, I'm just kind of facilitating a conversation between basically themselves and themselves in a way. And that actually can help people work out those internal conflicts and kind of realize that those two parts of you are always going to exist. The part of you that wants the thing that you want, the part of you that kind of resists that effort. And so it's like, instead of just like fighting each other all the time, you need to find a way to work together, because they're going to exist and they're going to butt heads. But if you can create like a partnership between those two parts of you, so they're in agreement on like, sometimes they do want that same goal of like, yeah, I do want to lose weight to feel good in my body, but I still love those cupcakes. I can't give up the cupcakes, kind of a thing. And just being like, what's really underneath all that thing? Like, maybe that part that sabotages you is, feeling like that cupcake is comfort and safety and reward for all the hard work that you've been doing, or things like, to kind of dig deeper into seeing like what's really going on there. What do they really want? Can we come to some sort of compromise so we can kind of like move forward with what we both want, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think that's another really important piece, which is in a roundabout way,
Mm-hmm.
getting really specific
Mm-hmm.
on the action and then going back to sort of the why, right?
Yeah.
Um, and also looking at the availability of alternatives. Like if you don't feel super motivated for one specific thing, right? For example, like I really don't want to give up these cupcakes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are there other types of cupcakes, right? Like is there a different
Yeah.
composition of cupcake that still allows you to like scratch that itch, but
Right.
without getting all the calories or whatever? Or
Mm-hmm.
if that's the one thing that you really want to hang on to,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of the stuff you don't really care about that much, is there a way that you can kind of reconstruct your diet sort of like around that specific thing, or basically whatever actions you can take to reduce friction
Mm-hmm.
towards taking the actions that you want, or are going to help with your motivation?
Yeah.
Because again, going back to sort of this like idea of effort, right? A lot of the
Mm-hmm.
times what is killing motivation is this perceived really high effort thing.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you can do, whether it's an alternative or like some change to your environment or
Mm-hmm.
some change to your thinking or change whatever else, whatever you can do to reduce that perceived effort is going to make it more likely that you can actually follow through on the things that are important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I think it's important to really get into like the details of, okay, why is this stuff important to me? What options do I have? Where
Mm-hmm.
can I go with it? Because at a certain point, we're like taking it back to the point of this podcast, which is happiness, right? At a certain point, you're like starting to play tug of war with certain aspects of happiness, which is like, oh, I get happy when I eat this, but then I don't like the weight that I'm at, and I don't like this thing. So picking all that apart and really getting clear on it helps um, find a path to be motivated or to create the best environment that's most likely to produce some level of motivation.
Yeah, exactly. I like that you brought it back to happiness, because it's having like both parts be happy to really ultimately win. It's like, yeah, maybe like for me, going back to my own personal experience, like I recently tried the keto diet for the first time, like for which is very challenging, and it was, yeah, hard initially because I was being very good and strict about like being diligent about it, but then I was just like losing my motivation gradually after a while, and I was like, I feel like I need some sort of treat or dessert for me to like continue to do this in the long term, because this is not sustainable. I can only eat so many like meat in a day, I guess, essentially. And so I found these fat bombers that are kind of like almost like pecan clusters, but only like 1 or 2 net carbs essentially. And I was like, yes, finally like something. But then I kind of went the opposite, where I was like overdoing it on them, doing way too many. So I just kind of like needed to find that balance of like, okay, I can only, I still get my treat in my mind. It's not necessarily cheating on my diet because it's within my diet limits, but I'm still eating a lot of whole healthy foods. But I'm limiting myself to like, one, to like satisfy the little girl that wants the sweet treat reward, but also satisfying the other part of me that wants to like lose weight and be healthier. So yeah, it's like both parties are winning to some degree. And yeah, and there's a little, give or take compromises, but I was able to like be able to, make both parts of me happy. No.
Yeah, and I feel like it's really important, like you were saying, to sort of look at what these alternatives are for
Mhm.
accomplishing the goal, because a lot of
Yeah.
times you can find a path that's far more motivating
Mm-hmm.
than the one that may be initially drilled into your brain, right? So, for
Yeah.
example, there's a lot of people who want to get in better shape, lose
Mm-hmm.
weight, whatever else, something in that bucket of health
Right.
behaviors. And what's in their mind is, oh, I need to get out to the gym or
Mm-hmm.
whatever else. But I mean, the goal or the intended outcome isn't I want to be in the gym, right? The intended outcome is
Yeah.
I want to have my body be strong and feel healthy and all this other stuff. So
Right.
a lot of times you can increase the motivation by just picking a different path. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
so many people who think that they need to go to the gym and fight themselves about that and about getting in there to like lift weights or go run or
Mm-hmm.
whatever else, when doing something like joining a kickball team or something would
Yeah.
activate sort of the exact same
Mm-hmm.
pathways to success, but in a way that might be way more motivating. So
Yeah.
um, while there are definitely pieces to if you have a set path to notch up your
Mm-hmm.
motivation,
Mm-hmm.
really making sure that that's the correct path for the goal you're trying to finish
Mm-hmm.
also makes sense. Again, I'm going to go back to my book, but there was a time where I was just doing, okay, I'm going to write this one paragraph, I'm going to write this one paragraph, and I had it set up in a way that I had the major sections, but I was just trying to fill in sequentially the whole rest of the book. Well, that was tough, and I still didn't want to do it most days.
Mm-hmm.
But I went through and in each section outlined sort of different, like the paragraphs, right? Just, a couple words of like, this paragraph should be about this, this should be about this should be
Mm-hmm.
about this. Then when I went back to do it, so easy, like
Mm-hmm.
flew through it because I had just changed the pathway just a little bit, right? Just
Yeah.
added a couple days of making more structure or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was so much more motivated because it was so much easier. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it all goes back to how do you reduce that friction? And one of the major things to look at for a lot of goals is the actual steps you're taking to accomplish that. Because most often there are many, many paths.
Yeah, that's really important, because I think, people assume like anything good and worthwhile it has to be hard, it has to be difficult, and it doesn't necessarily. It can actually be fun. And obviously things that are fun are more motivating, and you're more willing to want to do it if it's fun. Like, yeah, the exercise example, kickbox team sounds like way more fun, or a kickball team sounds like infinitely more fun than just like cranking out a gym workout. And I still like, I've never been that motivated to go to the gym. I mean, I've had plenty of gym memberships where I never went to the gym or would go rarely. One of those people that keeps paying monthly. And I'm like, I'm barely using my membership. Why do I keep paying this? But I guess I will, just to make it whatever. And it wasn't the path for me, but me having like CrossFit, having community, having a coach really amps my motivation. I get excited to see my friends and chat with them, and to have them being around other people motivates me versus me working out at home alone, which I've also done, which is not that motivating. I've done home workouts, and I will not work as hard because no one's looking. So how will they know? Kind of thing. So I think it's just like finding the right avenue that fits you, and to realize that it doesn't always have to be hard and difficult, that it can be fun if you look for ways to make it fun, in a way. So even if like eating, like going back to like the nutrition example, people be like, oh, I have to just eat carrot food or rabbit food, just like broccoli and chicken, and that's all I can eat forever. And that's just my life, and that's going to be miserable. Yeah, that is going to be miserable if that's all you're eating. But, you can actually, what I say because I work with people with nutrition all the time, it's like, no, you can make it fun. I give them like a buttload of recipes, and it's like a lot of them taste good. A lot of them are not that hard. I say like try out some recipes, so now you have some go-to recipes that are healthy for you, and so you're less likely to cheat and do other, like do your Taco Bell runs and things like that. So yeah, it's just like find a way to make it fun. And yeah, of course there's going to be a learning curve, and it'll take some time to figure out what works and what doesn't work for you. But once you do, doing that healthful eating is going to be so much easier when you kind of know the things that like what tastes good to you. It can taste good and still be healthy. That's possible.
Yeah. It's so important that you find a way to make the activity emotionally rewarding. Like you're saying, like find a way to make it fun. If you can do that, that's an even stronger predictor of habit building than repetition. So like if you can find some way to add in emotional gratification, that's going to be so useful for boosting your motivation. You also mentioned community support for basically anything that anyone's working on these days. You can get online and find a group of people who are kind of working on the same thing, at least something similar, if not the exact same thing. For a ton of people, that's much more motivating than trying to do it in the dark in a vacuum. You also get the added benefit of whatever roadblocks you run into, you have other people who may have faced the same sorts of things. If you're not feeling motivated for a very particular thing, they may have specific actions or ways that you can sort of reduce that friction and make it a little bit easier. And you also mentioned accountability, which is another thing that works well for a lot of people, having some sort of tracker or social accountability, somebody to check in with, something like that. For a lot of people, that makes a big difference because then you have sort of, it's actually beneficial in two ways. One, a lot of people just inherently increases their motivation. Like, oh, I need to fill out my tracker. Oh, I have to talk to my coach and I can't tell them I didn't do anything. As well as it generates sort of data or information that you can use to kind of look back and say like, what the hell? I missed all my Friday workouts. Like, what is going on here? Right? Like if you don't have that data or tracking or accountability, you don't really have a good way of noticing those patterns. But when you do, then you can go in and say like, oh, well, I always end up going out to eat after work and then I don't want to work out after that. Maybe I'll switch it to the morning or something like that. So I just rushed through those, but those three pieces you mentioned are all really powerful tools that we can leverage to increase motivation.
Yeah. And to kind of add to the accountability piece, especially when it comes to things that you don't even want to do, like maybe there's like a big work project and you're like, there's no way I can make this fun in any capacity. It's just like, you just have to get through it and get to the other side. And it seems overwhelming. For me, like having more than just accountability, I actually have a productivity coach to like help me like break down those arduous tasks that seem overwhelming that I don't want to do. Like I had so many things that I just kept putting off, like even like things that were in my to-do list for like a year or longer. And it was just like sad that it just has been sitting there for so long. But having the productivity coach, you know, like literally work with me to break it down, like doing my online course that I created, I was just like something I wanted to do for years. I was just resisting it. I could see that it like the outcome would be great, but it just seemed like overwhelming and just so much work. But to have her like help me break it down into like just do one training a week, it's like doable, or one thing a week, and I'm like, okay, yeah. And then it feels good once I actually got started. I was like, okay, this isn't that bad. And I just like had the accountability piece, but also, you know, the support to break it down with me. So I would actually do it. and yeah, once I got into the process of it, it was really not that hard, and I actually was more motivated to get it done within a reasonable timeline. Creating this course probably took a year and a half, but literally it was like a year and like 3 months of procrastination and not doing it, and then 3 months of actually doing it. So yeah, but it's like the doing part really makes a difference when you have like the support of a coach or someone who can kind of help you with the process of breaking it down.
Yeah, and for a lot of tasks or projects, the progress that you start making can be one of the most motivating things, you know. Whether that be, you know, your course, you probably at one point had a bunch of material and like, oh cool, like I just want to get the rest of this done. Or like working out, you start seeing changes in your strength or in your body or whatever else. Or but like getting past some of those initial hurdles, sometimes the motivation just sparks back up because you see like, oh cool, this is why I'm taking these actions. Like I have actual tangible evidence that the things that I'm doing are producing things.
Yeah.
Related to going back to like some of these bigger goals and stuff. And that can be just absolutely pivotal if you can get through, maybe with a coach, maybe with whatever else, those first however many sessions, however many instances. It typically gets easier from there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's like if you find a path that just isn't really working, you have every right to keep exploring one that works better. You know, for me, like continuing to try to rely on myself to do it was not working for me. And yeah, sometimes I would get like accountability buddies, like a friend to be my accountability buddy, and we'd have a check-in every week. Like, did you do it? And I'd be like, nope, I didn't do it again. And that wasn't enough. So like that structure wasn't working. Like even so, that's what like had me be like, okay, I'm gonna pay money to have someone like hold me to account and do it. And that actually got me to do it. So that was the thing that worked. And it was going through like various avenues to see what like would actually get me to do it. Yeah, do I love that I have to spend money for me to like do it? No, but it got it done, and it technically is making me money versus like just not doing anything for me. So it was a worthwhile investment in my mind.
Well, I think you touched on something that I've found to be pretty common in myself as well, which is just this idea that's like, I should be able to get everything done that I want to through discipline. Like
Right.
I should
Yeah,
just
I
be
just
able
need more
to make
discipline.
my course. I should be able to just do all this stuff.
Right.
And realistically, even the people who are very disciplined are using other tools to sort of get things done, right? So like one of the things I've heard quite a few times is this idea of like some sort of countdown, right? Maybe it's 5 or 3 or whatever. But they use sort of this mental tool of just like, I'm gonna count down from 5 to 1. When I get to 1, I'm just gonna do whatever it is. Even the people that are very disciplined have some sort of system or tools or habits built up from some point. I don't know. Like very few people are just, you know, as kids going around being ultra disciplined always and forever. We all have to sort of build up tools and figure out what works for us. And while that countdown method might work for some people, a lot of other people are going to need different things. And like you were saying, like accountability buddy didn't work exactly correct for you in the way you wanted, for other people it might. So it's just this mix of like, just keep messing around with it, because generally when you find these motivating tools, you can use them in more than one situation, right? Like I'm sure you can, um, I guess it's a productivity coach, but if you know coaching works for you, and I guess this sort of goes back to like the CrossFit stuff you're talking about,
Yeah.
right? It's like a different version of coaching,
Right.
that helps you get that stuff done. So a lot of times once you figure out whatever the tools are, you can apply them to a range of different activities.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like now I used to be in the mindset like years ago. I was like, oh, I don't have money for a coach. I'll just figure it out myself. And then it would be infinitely slower and not really move anywhere. And I'm like, man, if I learn how to like make more money sooner, then it would make the investment in a coach worthwhile. But now I have like, now if I feel like I'm not as effective as I want to be in any area of my life, whether it's my relationship, fitness, work, anything, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get a coach because I know that's gonna help me be more efficient. And so yeah, I literally have all three, like fitness coach, um productivity coach, I've got a relationship coach. It's just like coaches everywhere. And so that's kind of like my default when I know I can't rely on myself enough to be able to do it. I do have I just like a habit that I've been wanting to build consistently that I struggled with, even though I'm like preaching the benefits of meditation. I struggled with doing it consistently every day. And so I recently did a course. So it wasn't necessarily like a coach, it's like an instructor, but then there is some accountability to it. So I'm not like meeting with like the instructor all the time, but just like the format of knowing that like the structure of the meditation is to meditate twice a day for 20 minutes, which seemed overwhelming and a lot on my own, but for whatever reason I've been able to do it consistently, at least for the last few weeks, which I'm proud of. But you know, it just required like, yeah, maybe it's taking a course and having some guidance and having like a group community that has me do it, even if it's not necessarily a coach. Although I guess technically you could view him as a coach, but I don't really see him, more like an instructor. Yeah. So yeah, look at other avenues to have you be more consistent. Really goes a long way.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people give up way too early, right?
Yeah.
They try to do something, and working out is, I think, probably the most common example.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, I'm gonna go to the gym. They do it for like a day. That doesn't, they give up for the rest of the week, the rest of the month.
Yeah.
January is the absolute worst time to be at the gym because of that. Like it's always packed
everyone
with
has
people.
motivation then.
Yeah, who think they're gonna stay with it forever. But you know, but then I see sort of this other side of it, this like really, really low mood level of just like, well, I can't stick with this and I suck and I'm not able to work out and I guess I'll just be fat forever and I'm never gonna be able to run a marathon. I'm never gonna be able to do all this stuff. Like there's all this negative self-talk that often comes bundled in when motivation is low or isn't enough to get people to take action. And you know, the much more realistic path is not to expect like, okay, I'm going to be able to dial this in on the first attempt, but to just keep experimenting with different, like, okay, well, I don't really like going to the gym. I don't really like sports. Maybe I'll go to this other class. Maybe I'll try this other thing, and just continue chipping away at those different angles until you find something that fits enough. Because that other path, like I've seen it and I've experienced it, it can be just such a negative downward spiral that doesn't stop at just the one thing that I wasn't motivated to do. You know, it's like, I didn't work on the book today. Like, do I even want to work out? Do I even want to do do I even want to hang out with my friends? Do I even want to do any of this stuff? And it can just really add up quickly in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. I could see that being a real like spiral effect of just and really sucking your motivation more. It's really self-defeating and it's gonna like worsen your motivation if anything. So the thing that, you know, if I'm not like successful at things right away, which is not usually the case, I just kind of default to like, okay, the way I'm doing it right now is not quite working. because I'm not doing what I want to be doing. So like, what else do I need to be doing, or what structure do I need to put in place to get me to do it? And this is kind of like a little experiment to see, like, let's try this thing. Maybe this will have me be more consistent with this habit. Oh, nope, that didn't work. Okay, let me try this thing. Maybe this will be the thing that helps me. So it's kind of like having curiosity and exploring and being creative, of being like, I gotta eventually land on something that works. So let's just keep going through things until one actually works well for me. So yeah.
And paired with that, one of the aspects that I got a lot out of was switching my mindset from, hey, I want to get in shape, I need to do all this stuff, whatever, to looking at every instance as a win, every instance that's not the thing or is the thing that I want to do, whatever the case is, right? So there was a time when I was really trying to reduce my drinking, and I still ended up drinking quite a bit. And when I got my mindset around, like, every drink that I don't have is a victory for me, right? Every one that I don't have is putting me towards the direction that I would like to go. That sort of mindset really opened up my ability to experiment more, because then instead of focusing on like, damn it, I still had 6 drinks in a night, like that's way more than I want, I could focus on like, cool, Tuesday didn't drink anything, or like, Thursday went out and I had 1 drink with a friend, which is like the drinking level that I would like to be at.
That's a win.
So being able to sort of flip it from sort of this failure mindset towards a success mindset makes it a lot easier to sort of experiment and not feel like, oh shit, I'm failing at every turn, like I'm really not producing anything. Because the default path, right, if you weren't even trying, would be 100% non-compliance with whatever your goal is.
That kind of reminded me of I did this 6-week challenge, like health challenge, and you'd get a point for every day that you didn't drink. So I was like, oh well, that's, for me, that's not that hard. So I was like, yeah, I'm getting a point. But then it would also, like, even though it's like weekends, that's when I'm more likely to drink. I'm like, do I really need to drink? It had me like stop and kind of like, is this really necessary? I'm gonna lose my point if I drink it. Is it gonna be worth it? Sometimes it is worth it. But other things would be like, I'm not always consistent with my vegetables, but it's like every serving a vegetable you get, I'm like, okay, I get 1 more point. So I'm like, okay, I can do that. But then I can also not be feeling terrible if I ate that cookie, because that doesn't detract my points technically. Just like I ate more vegetables to make up for the to get a few more points. So that was kind of like a little more motivating for me to like, and there was another thing of drinking more water. I'm really terrible at drinking enough water of what's recommended for my body, which was like so much and so overwhelming how much water I needed to drink. And I was like, I still struggle with that today, but it was like, okay, I was much better when I was in that challenge, because I was like, okay, this is the goal that I'm going to try to hit for the day, versus now I don't really have a goal of like, okay, just drink when I'm thirsty kind of a thing. So therefore I probably don't drink enough water. But yeah, it's kind of make a game out of it can be a way to give yourself motivation. Like, I'm going to go for as many points as possible, or buddy up with a friend, have the same point system and be like, I'm going to beat you. Or if that motivates you, if you're a competitive type, maybe you're not. So maybe that's not the route for you, but try to make it fun. Going back to the fun piece. Like, that's what I do. That's what helps me.
Yeah. So I think kind of bringing a lot of what we talked about together, at a high level, sort of just relying on, or expecting, I guess is a better word, expecting to have a level 10 motivation all the time, just naturally, is not going to work out. But there are a ton of avenues to look at to find ways to adjust your motivation, adjust the task, adjust things so that you can get more in line with the sorts of behaviors you want. It's not this cut and dry, just like sheer willpower your way through it and just make it work. And if you don't, you're a failure. Right. There's a lot more nuance and a lot more space.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we covered this topic pretty well. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or? Awesome. All right. So
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com. And if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well. And that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.